That was quite a storm we had this morning. I don't know, Elsa, were you in on all that, or did you sleep your way through it? I know our call screener, it storm freaked him out. I guess it was about 5:30, 6 o'clock this morning. He got real restless. But yeah, I mean, winds were blowing through here like nobody's business. I mean, the rain was coming down hard and extended. I mean, it was, I don't know, we hadn't had a storm like that in a long time. And I saw on the, saw an X that a American Airlines 737 was sitting at the gate at DFW Airport this morning when the storm came through, and the winds literally blew the airplane away from the gate. I mean, moved it about 20 or 30 or 40 feet. It looked like it was backing away, but it wasn't. I mean, they were just sitting there, and I mean, that was impressive. Knocked our hammock into the pool. I had to fish that out this morning. So that was quite a storm. But things have calmed down. The winds have died down. The sun has come out. Got broken clouds. It's 70-something degrees. It's beautiful right now. You wouldn't have thought, except for seeing all the tree limbs and leaves and debris on the ground. From what I understand, they had to make some high water rescues because we had flash floods. But as of this moment, last I heard, there were no fatalities, so we're happy for that. But welcome to episode 8 of Beezy's Stream of Consciousness podcast, and I am your humble host, Beezy. Today is Wednesday, May 28th of 2024. I had fully intended to talk to everybody about Memorial Day yesterday. I meant to do a podcast yesterday, but as a wise man once said, affairs of state take precedent over affairs of state, so I was unable to do that. And part of it was I was wrestling with the format, what I was going to talk about, and I had wanted to adopt a kind of a somber tone and talk about the those who had died in service of the country, which is what Memorial Day is about. And anyway, reconsidered that, and then time got away from me. But I did want to bring up a couple of things. I mean, when most people think of Memorial Day, they think of picnics and can't say that anymore. Sorry, cookouts, grilling, hamburgers, hot dogs, being out at the lake, being by the pool, and but it's like Christmas isn't about Christmas trees. Easter's not about the Easter bunny. I mean, these holidays have certain appearances and trappings that belay what the holiday is actually about. And Memorial Day is just that. It is the day that we memorialize those who have died in service of our country. So, and before you're dismissive of that, or before you roll your eyes, I just wanted to say, for example, let's take the Korean War, for example. 39,000 Americans died in that conflict from 1950 to 1953, which technically has never ended. They did agree to ceasefire of sorts, but it is still, there's been no treaties between the North and the South. It's there is the demilitarized the DMZ between the North and the South, and which where no one can step foot beyond a certain point, either from the North or the South. But that basically ended in a stalemate for all intents and purposes. But before you say, well, why did 39,000 of our young people give their lives over there? I mean, what did we accomplish? Well, kept the South free for one thing. And before you say, well, what is that to me? Well, I don't know. If you drive a Hyundai or a Kia, had the North prevailed, we probably wouldn't be driving those. Um, Electronic devices, Samsung, LG, both of those come from South Korea. So anyway, sometimes it's nice to look past the obvious and think a little deeper about these things. But that's that. So it has been an interesting morning as we kind of clean up from the storm that hit us about 4:30 or 5 a.m. this morning, and uh, I was out and about in the aftermath today, and so it was interesting, and but looks like we're recovering from all of that. So let's move on to uh, more mundane matters. Let's talk about the Dallas Stars. They won their playoff game against the Edmonton Oilers last night, 5-3, in somewhat dramatic fashion. I had a rough time in the first period. We're down 2-zip early on. Couldn't really get anything going. And then they were like a different team in the second and third periods. I mean, they came out hair on fire, and young Jason Robertson, who hadn't scored a goal in I believe 11 playoff games so far, he had a hat trick. Three of the five goals were his, and it was really something. I watched most of the game, and it was watching that second and third period. I was reminded who the Dallas Stars are. I mean, they really imposed their will on the Oilers. So they're off today, but they'll be back in Dallas tomorrow. And the other impressive thing was they were playing in Edmonton, and those people up there were going crazy. I mean, they were chanting "Let's go Oilers," and I mean, they were loud. I mean, throughout probably the first period and a half, and so for the Stars to maintain their poise and their composure and elevate their energy level and their intensity, that was impressive to see. So I was happy for that, and I think most North Texas hockey fans were, unless you're from Edmonton and you're transplanted. Um, let's see, the Rangers were off, although they did win on Sunday and snapped a rather long losing streak for them. They'll be back at it again tonight here in Arlington at the barn. And first pitch 7:05. Um, and the injury bug just keeps biting those guys. They just can't seem to catch a break on the injury front. But in that respect, they're no different than any other professional sports team. Everybody has to deal with injuries. It's how you deal with those that define your season. So, and it's still early. Again, we play in a weak division, so we've got some time to get things squared away and start putting some distance between us and the other teams in our division. The Mavericks are a win from advancing to the NBA Finals. The Eastern Conference got their representative. It'll be the Boston Celtics. I'd love to see the Mavericks play the Celtics. That would be an awesome series. The Celtics are a storied franchise. When I was growing up, I mean, Larry Bird, Danny Ainge, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Dennis Johnson, Bill Walton. By the way, we lost Walton over the weekend. He succumbed to cancer. I believe he was 72. Great player out of UCLA, and one of the guys that really defined the big man position, the center in the NBA, along with Kareem and some other guys of that era, and Kelly Tripucka, and um, Bill Laimbeer. But Walton was a very colorful guy on and off the court. A great guy off the court. On the court, you loved playing with him, you hated playing against him. So he's one of those guys. So anyway, that's sports for DFW here today. We've got a lot planned for you this week. Obviously, Friday we'll have our top 10. We'll also be doing some interesting things tomorrow and Thursday. I won't tease those too much, but we'll be getting back into our initial format. We'll go over some classic TV, some of my favorite movies, some of my favorite books, and some commentary on those things. So, looking forward to sharing all that with you. So I think what we're going to do is going to take a quick break, and we'll come back and go over some other things. So stick around. And we are back. Hey, let's talk about something kind of near and dear to my heart that we just kind of touched on last week. But I figure I've been kind of catching up on some of this stuff recently. One of the great things about the interwebs and the streaming services is that if you look hard enough, you can find all those old shows that you grew up with or that I grew up with. Quick bio about me, about Beezy is I was born in 1966. Okay, so that makes me 58. That means, I was a kid in the 70s. I was a teenager in the 80s. And so there was a lot of great TV that we grew up with in those days. We didn't have the interwebs. We didn't have streaming services. We had, for the longest time, we just had the three major networks, CBS, NBC, and ABC. We had an independent television station here in DFW. We had a couple of UHF stations that had kind of, I would call it uneven programming. I mean, their formats changed quite a bit. And then, of course, PBS. So that was it on the TV. And so it was a big deal every night looking through the TV guide, which came in the newspaper. What are those? On Sunday. And it would have the grid with what all was going to be on a given channel at a given time with a little bit of a recap and so forth, because the networks would provide that information so that you would know what was coming on. And so we knew when our favorite shows were coming on, and if it was something fresh, then we knew that the latest episode was going to come on at 7 p.m., for example, on Wednesday on ABC. And if it was something the whole family wanted to watch, then we'd all be huddled around the TV waiting for that to come on. And there were all kinds of interesting commercials of the era that probably wouldn't stand up today, given our modern sensibilities. But nevertheless, a little bit of nostalgia. The programming would generally start early in the morning, 5 or 6 o'clock. You'd get the early news, which I wasn't interested in as a kid, obviously, and then it would move on to the morning shows, which would, for example, Good Morning America. I forget what the CBS and the other equivalents were, but it would be something national along those lines. And then you'd have several hours of game shows that would lead into the soap operas, and then about mid-afternoon, when most kids would start getting out of school, then it would get into more programming for young people and for kids. And a lot of it was, either reruns of Gilligan's Island or the Brady Bunch, and some, mixture of cartoons and live action stuff like the Banana Splits and things of that nature. The Monkees, Monkees. They they were, for those of you who are unfamiliar, they were the ones that recorded Daydream Believer and Last Train to Clarksville. They were four young guys, kind of molded after the success of the Beatles, and they had a television show, a situation comedy or sitcom, where they would get involved in silly situations that they generally would have to, figure their way out of, and then there would be some musical interlude at the end where they'd get up and they'd lip sync to one of their songs, kind of along the lines of the Partridge Family, and that was another one that had a family um, of kids ranging from teenage on down. Um, you know, they had their own band and led by their mother, and they had a converted school bus that was their um, tour bus, and they would play gigs, and they would get into comedic situations and so forth, and then they would have they'd play one of their songs there at the end, and so that was enjoyable and rather quaint and campy, but nevertheless it's for some of us old codgers that like to relive our youth. It's fun to watch that and see if uh, what, if any, of their shtick stands up to the test of time. And some of it does, most of it doesn't. I'll just admit that. But and then you'd get into the evening news. I never really understood why there was news at 5:30, and 6, and then there was national news. I didn't understand why the. Um, I'm sure somebody could explain that to me, or I could consult Dr. Google and he could explain it to me. But anyway, so you would have that, and that was right before supper time. And then you would get into the network programming from 7 p.m. Until the local news at 10. And then you'd have the late night show. And in those days, we had the Tonight Show was hosted by Johnny Carson, and he was a fixture in our living rooms for 25 or 30 years. I don't have it in front of me, but um, that's the one that we watched, and I know there were others, but and then I know in the 80s when Letterman came along, we would watch him. But the programming, there was some great shows. Hawaii Five O with Jack Lord, um, and the very famous theme music by the Ventures, the Hawaii Five O theme, just a great song. I've got that on my playlist on my phone, and so. What else did we have? I mean, we had Mannix, we had Cannon, we had Mash. Mash ran for I think 13 or 14 seasons from '72 to '85, and that was must see TV. Every week, see what Hawkeye and BJ and Trapper and the whole gang what they were up to over in Korea. As an interesting side note, I'm always interested to look at um, where things were filmed and the locations and where are they, what happened to them now and so forth. And the opening sequence, the famous sequence with the helicopters flying into the uh, the flying over the mountains, supposedly in outside of Uijeonbu in South Korea, was actually filmed, obviously, and right outside of Los Angeles. And I always, it drives my family crazy, but every time we watch MASH, and I'll point to that sequence, and I'll say, man, that looks nothing like Southern California. And even there's even a shot where the helicopters are landing on the pad right above the hospital, and you can see the TV towers very briefly in the background on top of one of those mountains. And since it was filmed right outside of Los Angeles, and So that was always fun. And oh, let's see what else. Fantasy Island, The Love Boat. Um, Always enjoyed seeing the guest stars on Fantasy Island and The Love Boat. Um, I was uh, the Captain Stubing of the Pacific Princess, which was the cruise ship for the Love Boat. Darren McGavin, not Darren McGavin, Gavin McLeod was the actor who portrayed the captain. He's recently deceased, but I was watching reruns of Hogan's Heroes the other night. I told you about seeing Ruta Lee as a guest star on there, but Gavin McLeod was at least 3 episodes I saw where he played some uh, German character, and it was interesting to see them um, see him dress him up as a Gestapo agent or as a Nazi general or as some other kind of German character, and the seeing all of these actors that you saw in other roles, affecting these phony German accents, and again campy, but a lot of fun to watch. And most of these shows were 30 minutes. Some were up to an hour, but we had a good time watching those. And some shows didn't last but a season or two. One of my favorites was reason I got uh, Darren McGavin on my mind was a mystery called Kolchak the Night Stalker. And if you're unfamiliar with that, that was a that only ran for one season in 1974, and I think it was on ABC. And it centered around Darren McGavin played. His last name was Kolchak. His first name escapes me, but he played an investigative reporter for a second-rate newspaper. Simon Oakland was his always hacked off boss and always threatening him with his job because Kolchak was always, chasing stories that he shouldn't be chasing, and he was fascinated with monsters, stories, and paranormal stuff, kind of like X Files, way before the X Files, and so he would always, he'd hear about a vampire that was inhabiting or terrorizing a certain part of the city, and he would go and stake it out, no pun intended, and um, see what the story was. And he carried around his little camera, and he had his tape recorder, and he had his little straw fedora, and he drove a yellow Mustang convertible that I loved, and he was always getting into trouble, and but he would somehow find his way out at the end of the episode. So that was good. Kolchak, the Night Stalker, is what it was called. Kolchak, the Night Stalker is the name of it, and I think somewhere you can find it on one of the streaming services. It does pop up from time to time, but it's worth a watch. It's interesting, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the actor, he played the old man, Mr. Parker in A Christmas Story. He was Ralphie and Randy's dad, the one that um, uh, did the newspaper um, quiz or trivia contest and won the leg lamp. That was his major award, and that was a great subplot in that movie. Was this fishnet stockinged leg with a lampshade on top of it that illuminated, and that his wife hated and that he loved, and so there was a whole kind of subtext in the movie about the lamp. His major award is the old man's greatest moment, is what Ralphie said. So his finest hour, and so another great movie. And if should our podcast survive to the holidays, then I'll devote some episodes to that great movie, and we can talk about that. But I mean, lots of other shows over the years. that we really enjoyed watching. Talk about Hogan's Heroes, of course, Star Trek, the original series. It was in syndication by then, and that was always something we looked forward to, and it always came on either right during or right after supper time. So always associate Star Trek with eating with the family. So that was fun. Um, and then Saturday morning we had the Saturday morning cartoons, different from what we have today. I don't know really what the kids are watching now, um, but on Saturday morning we had the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show, which started out just running an hour and then ended up being 3 hours, and it was all the great Looney Tunes shorts that um, all of us kids grew up watching Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and always enjoying how Bugs would outsmart gangsters and um, uh, Elmer Fudd and Daffy and all of that. And my dad famously said all that he knew about Shakespeare he learned from Bugs Bunny. So that was those were the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end. And then we had some other stuff. We had Land of the Lost. We had Fat Albert and Cosby Kids before Bill Cosby got into all kinds of trouble. Um, but that was fun. And then in the afternoon, if we weren't out playing, depending on the season, college football. Um, we'd have baseball during the summer, um, and the Wide World of Sports. I believe it was ABC's Wide World of Sports. The Agony of Defeat. I know there's a story about that ski jumper that didn't quite get airborne and had a horrible fail, and that was a famous image of that. So, um, but all those great shows that those are touchstones of my youth, and I guess everybody's got the same thing for their era. But that's just a little taste of mine, and appreciate you bearing with me as I ramble about that. But this is my stream of consciousness, so stick around. We'll be right back. And before I forget, I did want to give a shout out to Audacity for um, the production of the podcast that you're hearing today, and Podbean for facilitating the distribution of same to whatever platform you're listening to. So thank you for that, and for SoundRoll for their good work in providing the intro and outro music. So appreciate that. Um, but last segment, I wanted to talk about a book trilogy that um, doesn't get as much press as it should, and is really a good read. It's actually, I guess it would be categorized as young adult fiction, and it is the Borrible Trilogy, the Borrible Trilogy by Michael De Larabetti. He is sounds Italian, but he is actually English, and it centers around characters known as Borribles, and these are children who have, for whatever reason, run away from home, or they've gotten into some kind of trouble and have escaped, and they um, they congregate in groups of these runaway children, and they become what they call borribled. They become borribles, as opposed to normals or normal children. They cease to age. Their ears become pointed, and the more pointed the ears are, the higher the intelligence and the cunning the child, and they congregate in groups by geography. Supposedly there are groups of Borrible children all over the world, but for the sake of these this trilogy that Dallaire Betty narrates, um, it centers around London, and these are English children who have become Borribles, and they group together their um, by their boroughs or their manor, Manor. In other words, where they are they from Battersea? Are they from Brixton? Are they from Hoxton? Are they from Whitechapel, Neasden, um, Stepney, um, Spitalfields? I mean, I've learned so much about English neighborhoods or geographical areas in reading these books, but they're they have comical elements, but they also have some serious stuff. I mean, the Borbles find themselves in all sorts of trouble with the law, as you can imagine, because their lives become they basically become thieving vagrants. They squat in derelict or abandoned houses or businesses, and they you may or may not be aware of the street markets throughout London, and they pick up a living stealing from those markets and anywhere else that they can for the things that they need. They have developed their own subculture. They have their own book of proverbs. Um, they have their own rules that they follow, which may seem strange, but they have their own code, and they they're generally distrustful of strangers, although of other Borribles. I mean, once you know they accept you as a member of their particular tribe, then they'll fight to the death to protect you, just as they would any other member of the tribe. So um, it's very interesting. There are three books. The first book is called The Borribles. The second is called The Borribles Go for Broke, and the third is called The Borribles Across the Dark Metropolis. And each book becomes a little bit more darker in tone than the rest. In the first book, it's kind of a journey. Their sworn enemies are um, um, anthropomorphic, huge rodents called rumbles, who talk like Elmer Fudd. They can't say that they can't pronounce their R's. It's quite funny. Um, but they further south of London is a hill in kind of a disused or windswept area that's called Rumbledom, and inside the hill is where the Rumbles live, and they're very haughty, and um, they're very um, industrialized. I mean, they whereas the Borribles are dirty street urchins basically. The Rumbles they're very clean. They they have great workshops and all kinds of industries inside that hill that support their Rumble bunker, so to speak. But they are the enemies of the Borribles, and um, the Borribles decide to send an expedition of champions, one from each London borough, to take on the Rumbles in their uh, in their bunker, and it becomes the journey itself becomes a big part of the story. Um, the Borribles, once they make it to Rumbledom, they've got eight or nine, I believe, of these crack Borrible fighters and runners and so forth that are to penetrate and infiltrate the Rumble bunker and assassinate the members of the Rumble High Command so that the Rumbles won't bother the Borribles in London anymore. So anyway, that gives you a little bit to go on. There's a big battle, of course, a climactic battle, and um, then the Borribles have to make their way through Wandsworth, which is yet another borough of Borribles called the Wendels, and the Wendels are very, very distrustful, and they betray uh, the champions, and there's another battle between Borrible tribes there. And anyway, it's very interesting, and the two subsequent books, Borribles Go for Broke and Across the Great Dark Metropolis, that recounts how the events of the first book have great repercussions for these surviving members of the expedition, and they all of this thieving activity and so forth has drawn the attention of the London police, who have put together or formed a special Borrible group that is determined to catch as many Borribles as possible, clip their ears surgically, because once a Borrible's ears are clipped, they grow into adulthood. They cease becoming a Borrible, and then they forget everything they knew about being a Borrible, and they become boring adults, as Borribles would say. And that's something all Borribles live in great fear of, is being caught by the police and having their ears clipped. And the reason is they love their independent life, being beholden to no one but their tribe. So anyway, again, this is the Borrible Trilogy by Michael DeLaurebetti. It has been reissued. It was out of print for a while, but it's still available. You can find it on Amazon or any of the online booksellers. So I highly recommend it. It gives an interesting insight into life in London. I love British things. I love their idioms. I love listening to them speak, and reading an Englishman writing about other Englishmen or English children is a real treat. And DeLaurebetti has he has a flair for the comedic. He also has a flair for the dark as well. So if you're thinking it's going to be this cutesy story about kids that have been transformed into something else, it's not. But it is, like I say, it gives an interesting insight and twist into British culture and language, and so I do recommend it. So that pretty much does it for today's podcast. I do appreciate you spending your time with me, and we're going to talk again tomorrow. So on behalf of my very sleepy staff here, producer Elsa, engineer Lily, and audio screener and resident security officer Finn, wish you live long and prosper, and we'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see you then.